Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. It's Wednesday, which means it is time for our weekly redraft. We have been doing a redraft every single Wednesday on this channel. We started in 2020, and we have worked our way down to 2016, which I think would be regarded as somewhat of an all-time draft if the 2015 draft wasn't the year before it. This draft is absolutely loaded. So when looking at it, what we do with this, we do the top 10. Here is the initial OG top 10. Matthews, Laine, PLD, Puljujarvi, Juolevi, Tkachuk, Keller, Nylander, Sergachev, and Jost. When looking at it, some great players, but also some big time busts. And yeah, we redraft the top 10. This is mainly based on who I think is going to have the best overall career based on what they've done in prior seasons, this season, and going forward. Projecting that if it is close between these players, we go more so towards what the team exactly needed at the time. Did they have a bunch of great young forwards, great young defensemen, and as a result, they had a positional need. So yeah, 2016 redraft. When looking at this, I think the 1 through 4, we're going to start with 1. 1 through 4 is pretty straightforward. I think everybody's going to agree with it. 5 through 7, there's going to be some heavy debates. And then like 8 through 13 is going to be up in the air. This is definitely a pretty tough redraft. But let's start with what you're going to agree with me. Let's not get the pitchforks out right away. And at first overall, Matthews went here. I'm going to still have Austin Matthews going to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Yes, when looking at it, you maybe want more signature playoff moments and better play in the playoffs, but he still is genuinely a generational goal scorer. I mean, in his first goddamn season, he scored 40 goals and won the Calder Trophy. He continued to progress. In 2020, he had 47 goals in 70 games at like 22 years old, was 1 goal off of the Rocket Richard. Then the following year, 41 goals in 52 games in the COVID-shortened season, followed that up with 60 goals and won the Rocket Richard in the Hart Trophy. The last 3 years, he has been injured for 2 of those, but he also has a 60-goal season. He is just such an amazing goal scorer. And even in the playoffs, although it's, again, you expect more from a guy that is such a prolific goal scorer, he still does have 59 points, 68 games. Needs to be better in the back half of the series, but it's not like he's putting up 50-point pace in the playoffs. If you have a Game 7 tomorrow, you maybe go with the guy that I have at number 2 in this redraft, but if you're starting a team from scratch, I still think it is Austin Matthews. And I think at some point he will have some kind of great playoff run, and he's probably going to go down as a top 40 greatest player of all time, considering at age 27, here he has 1 Hart Trophy, 3 Rocket Richards, is on pace for like, at least if he can stay healthy, at least like 700 career goals. I think that's like the minimum if he stays healthy, and he could be chasing for 3rd all time, maybe even get to a Wayne Gretzky number if he could stay healthy. But we're not going to debate that right now. At number 2, originally the Winnipeg Jets went with Patrik Laine. Now I'm going to be going with Matthew Tkachuk here. When looking at Winnipeg, they took a winger here in 2016. They get another winger, kind of like the polar opposite of Patrik Laine in terms of Laine, pure sniper, not the most physical guy. They get a gritty playmaking winger in Matthew Tkachuk. And when looking at Winnipeg at the time, they quickly, after 2 years later, made the Western Conference Finals. So it's good to have Matthew Tkachuk, who after going 6th overall in the 2016 draft, jumped right into the NHL and was a pretty effective player, having 48 points in his first season in the NHL. By year 3, had 34 goals, 43 assists, 77 points. He's one of the most young, exciting, best U23 players in the NHL. Him, Johnny Gaudreau, happy birthday, Johnny Gaudreau, rest in peace, as well as Elias Lindholm, formed such an amazing line in Calgary. And in 2022, he had his first 100-point season with 42 goals, 62 assists, 104 points. They had a 62.2% expected goals percentage, one of the best regular season lines of all time in NHL history. He, of course, gets traded to the Florida Panthers. His first season in Florida has 109 points. In the last 2 years, has been slightly over a point per game. And in the playoffs, consistently around a point per game, 2-time Stanley Cup winner. I think he's the clear pick right now for the Winnipeg Jets. And maybe they potentially beat the Vegas Golden Knights or something in 2018 if they have Matthew Tkachuk. But yeah, Matthew Tkachuk is the 2nd overall pick for the Winnipeg Jets. At 3rd overall, the Columbus Blue Jackets initially went with Pierre-Luc Dubois. I have been going with Adam Fox. With this, we are acting as if Adam Fox is not going to force his way to the New York Rangers, that he is going to stick with the Columbus Blue Jackets. And if he goes to Columbus, my God, they might have one of the best 1-2 punches in terms of defensemen of all time with him and Zach Werenski, who they selected in 2015. And yeah, Adam Fox, again, although you probably would want to forward if you're Columbus, Adam Fox has far and away had the 3rd best career thus far out of the 2016 guys, and going forward probably will as well, considering in the fact that this guy, after 3 seasons at the college level, walked into the NHL and had 42 points. Was only playing like 18 minutes a night total on that season. But when you look at the back half of that season, he had 25 points in his final 32 games. And then the next season, literally won the Norris Trophy. And basically since then has been a consistent 70-ish point, great two-way defenseman, analytical, absolute darling. So yeah, Columbus just locks up their amazing defenseman duo, the best defenseman duo for the entire 2020s for the most part. You either put them on a pair, you separate them, but that would have been freaking awesome, and Columbus would be amazing. Defensively, at 4th overall, Jesse Puljujarvi initially went to the Edmonton Oilers. I have them now going with Charlie McAvoy. When looking at the Edmonton Oilers at the time, they had got Draisaitl in 2014. They had McDavid in 2015, who was already amazing. And they had RNH back in 2011. They had Jordan Eberle still on the team. So they definitely more so needed defensemen. They did have Darnell Nurse and Clefbaum within the system, but they were lefties and they were not proven NHL players at the time. So Charlie McAvoy, who I think has pretty easily had the 4th best career up until this point. Going forward, there may be some question marks whether he'll maintain that 4th spot, but I think especially given the positional fit for Edmonton, I think that he is the pick here. Similar to Adam Fox, basically hit the ground running at the NHL level and was a very good two-way, more so defensive defenseman. Him, Krug, and Chara kind of formed that amazing 3-headed monster for the Boston Bruins. And once Krug left, he kind of stepped up and really started to produce offensively around 55 to 60 point pace. The last 2 years have not been awesome, but this guy has been a legit top 6 to 12 defenseman the last 4 to 5 years for the most part. So for Edmonton, they get their number 1 defenseman, and more so of a defensive number 1 defenseman. Again, they don't have Evan Bouchard at this point, but they get more of a two-way guy, and maybe they potentially win the Stanley Cup one of those years in the 2020s if they had such a great number 1 defenseman like Charlie McAvoy. At 5th overall, Juolevi initially went to the Vancouver Canucks, one of the biggest busts in NHL history. I'm going to go with Clayton Keller here. When looking at Vancouver, they definitely would want more so of a defenseman, hence why they went with Juolevi, because they did have Besser, they did have a young Bo Horvat, but I think Keller, there's no real defenseman that's really in the same tier as Clayton Keller, so I think Keller makes sense here. When looking at him, he spent 1 season in college, absolutely dominated, made the jump to the NHL level, had 65 points at like 19 years old, and was 3rd place in the Calder. He was solid the next 3 years, but Arizona just kind of just like freaking sucked, and then he got back on track 4 seasons ago with the 63-point season, and basically since then has been around the point per game or above a point per game. Awesome playmaking and goal-scoring winger in Arizona with like Nick Schmaltz and Barrett Hayden as his top 2 line mates. He has not even had a number 1 center in his career. If he played with Bo Horvat in this situation, that'd be by far the best center that he's played with. In this season, had 30 goals and 89 points. Or was it 90 points? He's awesome. He had an immediate impact compared to the next 2 guys, where it did take a little bit longer for them to develop, and I think they're all kind of on a similar tier for the most part. So I'm going to go with Clayton Keller. 5th overall for the Vancouver Canucks. At 6th overall, the Calgary Flames initially went with Matthew Tkachuk. He's off the board. Now I have them going with Tage Thompson. Yes, the Flames maybe did need more so of an NHL-ready body at the time, considering they did have their core that was a good team, and shortly after, yet again, made the playoffs. But I do think Tage Thompson, in terms of actually getting that number 1 center, that's kind of the thing that has eluded the Calgary Flames for a while. I do think he is the pick here. He didn't hit the ground running at 19 or 20 years old like some of the other guys that we're going to talk about, but the last 4 years, he's been one of the best goal-scoring centers in the NHL. Legit, true, number 1 center. So yeah, he's just a unicorn kind of talent, and the Calgary Flames have severely lacked that offensive difference maker, playmaker the last couple of years since their top 2 guys left. So they go with Tage Thompson at number 7, kind of finishing off this little 5 through 7 tier in my opinion. The Coyotes initially went with Clayton Keller. Now I have them going with Jesper Bratt. When looking at him, again, easily could put him 5th, easily could put him 6th. I'm not trying to disrespect Bratt, although I'm sure people will scream in the comments that I'm underrating him. He's awesome. This tier is pretty interchangeable, because when you look at Bratt, he actually made the NHL as a 6th round pick in his draft year +2, was a solid middle 6 forward for a couple of years, and then really broke out in 2022 for 73 points, and basically since then has been around an 80-point guy. This year hitting a career high of 88 points. One of the best skaters in the NHL, amazing playmaker. Arizona at the time really just needed everything for the most part, so they go with Jesper Bratt and lock up an elite first line. Wing for 8th overall. The Buffalo Sabres initially went with Alex Nylander. Now I have them going with Mikhail Sergachev. When looking at positional here, because I think that it does fall off a tier, and then these guys are all kind of in the same tier. Buffalo definitely needed a number one offensive defenseman in the 2016 draft, considering they had Eichel in 2015. They had Reinhart in 2014. They had Ristolainen, who was more so of a right-handed defensive defenseman in 2013. So they needed that elite lefty that eventually, of course, they got in 2018. But yeah, Sergachev was a solid around the half a point per game guy from like 2020 to 2022 on those Tampa Bay Lightning Stanley Cup teams behind Hedman and McDonough. But then he really broke out in 2023 with a 64-point season. Unfortunately, shattered his leg the next year. But this year handled like 25 minutes a night, had 54 points for the Utah Hockey Club. And I think on Buffalo, as I talked about before, that would be a really fun offense. It would be a really fun top power play alongside some of those guys. I think he makes a lot of sense, especially positionally. For the Buffalo Sabres at 9th overall, the Montreal Canadiens initially took Mikhail Sergachev and then traded him, unfortunately, for Jonathan Drouin. Now I have them taking Alex DeBrincat. When looking at DeBrincat, Montreal basically just gets their Cole Caulfield 3 years early, and DeBrincat really hit the ground running at the NHL level. Granted, he did walk into like one of the best situations for a young guy playing alongside Patrick Kane, but this guy to start his career, 3 out of his first 5 seasons were 40 goal pace seasons. He was amazing. He is an amazing goal scorer, great shot. He had 2 solid to good seasons in Ottawa and Detroit, but really got back on track this year with 39 goals and 70 points. When looking at him in this draft class, he's actually the 2nd leading goal scorer and has the 3rd most points, only behind Matthews and Tkachuk. So yeah, in terms of right now, you could make an argument that DeBrincat has had like the 4th or 5th best career in this draft. Matthews, Tkachuk, and Fox I would all have ahead of him, but you could make a strong argument that DeBrincat is ahead of McAvoy just because he's been doing it for so long. But I think just going forward, I'm not quite as high on him as some other guys. Again, a very good first liner, and I think at 9th overall, it makes sense for Montreal, who didn't really have a preference in terms of who they needed at the time. And then to finish it off at 10th overall, Colorado initially went with Tyson Jost. Now I have them going with Jordan Kyrou. When looking at Kyrou, I think he fit right in with that Colorado speedy forward core. And when looking at him, he made his first impact season in 2021, being around a 50-point pace guy. And then in that 2022 season, when the Colorado Avalanche, of course, won the Stanley Cup, he was already a point-per-game guy by then. And basically the last 3 seasons has been going at around 35 and 35 pace on the St. Louis Blues. You throw him with the Nathan McKinnon, you even put him on the second line, he would have been absolutely fantastic on the Colorado Avalanche. And especially his defensive numbers the last couple of years have been much better relative to the start of the career where he's kind of was a defensive black hole. So I think he makes a lot of sense for the Colorado Avalanche in terms of being an impact guy relatively soon. And even going forward, you can kind of count on him to be a 30 and 30-ish forward. So here's the final. When looking at it, Matthews 1st overall, Matthew Tkachuk 2nd overall, Fox to the Columbus Blue Jackets, McAvoy to the Oilers, Keller, Thompson, Bratt, Sergachev, DeBrincat, and Kyrou. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about this? Honorable mentions, honorable mentions. Brandon Hagel going forward, I think will have a top 10 career in this redraft, like here and on. But he just didn't really make it to the NHL level until like 2022 and wasn't really a high impact guy until like 2023, 2024. So I think when looking at DeBrincat, a Kyrou who were much better early on, I would take Hagel right now going forward, but the gap was just that big. Patrick Laine going forward, right now he's probably at a top 10 career in this redraft, but going forward, I don't think that he's close to a top 10 just because of the injuries, just because of the lack of defense. He's really just power play merchant at this point. Jacob Chikrin, definitely top 15, not quite top 10. If there was a big positional need, maybe you could justify him going top 10, but not quite. Gustafsson, if he stacks up another elite season, he was great in 2023, great in 2025. If he goes and has a Vezina finalist season, I could see you putting him 9th or 10th overall. Pierre-Luc Dubois, very good bounce back season, but can't quite throw him on this. And then also Joseph Woll, if he continues to develop and takes over as a starter and has some really good seasons, maybe you could justify him putting him on here, but just not quite for that. But yeah, let me know in the comments, what do you think about this redraft? Who would you move up? Who would you move down? Who would you put in? Who would you take out? I'll be seeing you in the next one. Peace.